2,000-Year-Old Man. It is Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks. It is the funniest animated interview, for lack of a better word.
The 2,000-Year-Old Man?
It's called The 2,000-Year-Old Man. It stars Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks. This is an old cartoon from like the early 70s. However, it is basically, if you discovered a 2,000-year-old man, what would you ask him? And what would his answers be? And of course it's Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner, which are both insane. And getting their answers will prep you for interviewing people of other worlds. You obviously grew up here, you didn't grow up in Australia.
Right, not here, but in the U.S.
And judging that you're not an Aboriginal, your family obviously hadn't gotten to Australia by all that long.
Right.
So, so you've got multiple generations of people literally continent hopping.
Mm-hmm.
Because were they English or were they Dutch?
English and Welsh.
English and Welsh, which is an odd combination right there, because English and Welsh don't generally like each other.
True.
So, there's some great stories there, because, when you add combinations in your family, you have to remember the history of that combination.
Right. Yeah. There's a story I know back there. If I could find anybody.
There's some very angry parents going, "You're dating what?" There was more than one pint of Guinness. Other thing to remember is you can also divide the world up in by what we drank.
What we drank.
What we drank.
Meaning.
This is the coffee. This is the caffeine generation.
Oh, okay.
This right now, you are growing up in the caffeine generation. Because everything on the planet, including soap and toothpaste, has caffeine in it, doesn't it? Well, it's caffeine in bacon, because apparently, we have bacon-flavored soap these days.
Yeah.
But prior to caffeine, prior to soda pops, what was our big? What did we drink? Clean water was a rare thing. So tea was an answer to the fact that water wasn't clean. So you would boil the water and add flavor to it, and now you could drink the water. Mm-hmm. Well, before that, what did we drink? For most of human history, what did we drink?
Ale.
Milk?
Whiskey.
I don't know.
Alcohol.
Okay.
Beer is the source of the human race. So when you go back in time, once you get past the 50s, there were, if you were English and Welsh in your family, there were people that had a Guinness for breakfast. And then we're talking 5-year-olds.
You're Italian. Wine is part of every meal. It's just part of life.
So this goes back to filling in all the senses of your history and your story, because as you move around, you get to Australia. Australia was a whole other planet.
Mm-hmm.
And here the British were trying to make it look like England.
Mm-hmm.
And let's face it.
Right.
It doesn't look anything like England. Yeah, bunny rabbits were 6 foot tall.
And we were talking about research. Chrissy, talk about some of the research you had to do for your story.
Well, mine's based on Norse mythology, and it started out as a 5,000-word historical back in when the Vikings first invaded Ireland. So I did 6 months worth of research. I was only exposed to Greek mythology in school, so I had to research Norse mythology on my own, and wanted to make sure I had a good understanding of everything that was going on in that time period when I wrote that. And then when I hit the end, they were like, "No, we're not done. Go sit back down." And so I recreated them in modern times. So it's a little bit of time travel in there too. So, but yeah, research, you really have to know what you're talking. You have to have a good understanding in order to convey what you want to say on the page. And your readers will call you out if you don't hit it on the mark.
Sure.
And even in something, mine's set in modern times, but I have to know how long it takes to fly from the Memphis area to say Scotland. How am I going to get there? how long is it gonna take? And oh, by the way, what's the terrain like? If I need them to be in the woods doing something, I gotta make sure there is woods. Now, I don't have to set into a real bar. I can make up my own restaurants and bars if I want to, but the topography counts. So, you know, if I come into Memphis, I can't call it a desert, you know? Gotta know there's trees and there's rivers and stuff around. You kinda gotta know that setting. So if I need a fight or something to happen in a snow-capped mountain, I gotta get them to a snow-capped mountain, because we don't have those in Memphis. So you have to think about, even in real-world settings, there is still got to be some reality, because your reader, if they know anything about the world, knows, okay, Memphis doesn't have mountains. So that doesn't make any sense to me. Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, could you recap the last hour?
Yeah.
Yes, you can watch it on video.
Yes, you'll be able to find it on YouTube.
You'll be able to watch yourself on YouTube.
So did you feel like, because you were writing about, you said Norse, so in the Norway area, did you feel like you were able to research enough? I mean, I guess with the internet, we have so many
Oh, gosh, it's
resources
endless.
available to you.
Oh, I checked out all kinds of books, not just, I didn't rely on.
You don't feel like you
the
ever had to
internet.
fly to Norway to
No,
get the feel of
No,
it?
you can get a good feel without
Okay.
being.
Get
Because, you know,
travel books.
Google Earth,
Go to the library, check out
Oh,
travel
yeah,
books.
Google Earth is great.
Google Earth.
it's true.
Travel books will give you, a lot of times they'll have more of a descriptive that gives you that look and feel. And it might actually give you words that seem to fit the area more, so that when you start to write, if you pick up some of those same keywords, then it makes it more believable, because you're using the speak that other people use to describe that region.
There was a great commercial with Jerry Seinfeld a few years ago, where he's trying to do the stand-up routine, and he's in England, and he totally bombs. So he whips out his American Express card and rides all around England to get the experience. And then, you know, it shows his little stand-up routine, totally slaying him at the end, and, you know, because now he knows what bangers and mash is, now he knows what, you know, the local colloquialisms are. So, you know, suddenly he's less of a Yankee and more the home team. So, but you don't actually have to go there to get your major points. But just kind of remember, especially for like what you're doing like the family history, just keep in mind it's not in a vacuum. Because
Right.
you know, when somebody mentions something specific, a specific year, it's really easy to go to the internet now and just look up all of the major headlines going on at that time. And you're gonna be like going, oh, wow, I didn't know that movie came out then. I didn't know, and look at the year before, because the year before is the year that's really impacting the year you're in now. So if they got here in 1950, 1949 and 1948 is where they were having to make up their mind.
Right.
And now you can be like, oh, and you know, well, you know, there were movies that came out like The Grapes of Wrath. The Grapes of Wrath is not exactly a happy-go-lucky movie.
Well, John Steinbeck, right?
Yeah, it's the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl, and you know, certain parts of the world were showing that as, you know, see, America kind of sucks. And the one thing everybody got was, yeah, but if it sucks there, they can get up and leave. You know, so it was unintended messages.
It's so funny you said that, because I was just thinking about Steinbeck, because we're big Steinbeck fans, and Grace's mom. And one thing when you read like East of Eden, he goes into such incredible detail about the Salinas Valley and the land, and the
Yes.
land's effects and influences on the people. And he goes into such detail about the economic factors that are playing into it, to where you feel like you know the place, and you feel like knowing the place, you have such better insight into the people. It's so crazy, because I was just thinking Steinbeck, and then you mentioned Grace of Wrath.
Oh yeah, it was wonderful. I mean, he was one of the most descriptive writers out there.
Yeah.
And you didn't mind.
Yeah.
I mean, he would talk about a overpass for 3 pages.
Yeah, and then he ties it back in.
And then, you know, and then we started to van up and cross the overpass, and you're like, yeah, but you still didn't cover the mushrooms. Come on, man. You missed something, you know. Again, it's all style. And you went into something called the culture, or what I like to call the temperature of a book. The temperature of a book in a Steinbeck, you know you're reading a Steinbeck within a page.
Yeah.
There's just a meter There's a style to it, there's just a process. You know, what we say writers' voices. You pick up Kimberly Richardson book, you know within 2 paragraphs. You pick up an Anne Rice book, you know within a page. Disembodied, just a disembodied page, you can pretty much guess a major writer. And Steinbeck is so easy. You just look at that and, oh, Steinbeck, you know. So descriptive, so wonderful, and you don't mind.
Yeah.
And other writers, they start doing that, it's like data dumping. It's like, oh, you're just dragging me down.
Yeah, and you want
Can
to
we-
skip that part.
Can we go blow something up? I don't care, you know.
Yeah, I don't want to hear 2 paragraphs of why the bark and the tree look what they look like. I really can't do it.
But you couldn't put down Tolkien, who spent 3 pages talking about gnats eating the hobbits.
Yes, I'm reading Terry Brooks. I'm reading the Short Shannara series. That's got a lot of descriptive in it, but there's a difference.
It seems like a really good writer creates that world that you want to be immersed in. You're not just getting to the point. You're not just trying to get to what happens. You're really kind of immersing yourself in the world they created.
And you know, from your perspective, you're writing about your parents, your family, and historical. Well, there's all the years that they lived there and they grew up there and how they envisioned their life that sets the tone for why did it suddenly get that I needed to leave or I wanted to leave. Why did you suddenly walk away from what you envision your life and you're willing to go, you know, I need to try something new. There's got to be a pivotal point there, but you've got to build the comfort factor of this is why I would have lived here all my life until this happened. And then I felt like I needed to leave or I wanted to leave and why. So you've got to build them up with those descriptions of why it's comfortable and what life should be like in order to make your reason for change believable.
Yeah, at some point, somebody had to go, we're moving to another planet. Well, I mean, honestly, you think about crossing cultures, you know, the one thing 23andMe and Ancestry DNA and everybody has pointed out is nobody is what they thought they were. Everybody is something. And you're something your parents didn't tell you. You know, that's the other part. Everybody found out your family lied. And it happens. So, you know, as people are learning these things and the, you know, irrefutable truths are coming out, you kind of like, wow, okay. You know, why did somebody in your family claim to be, you know, what do they call them, a Black Dutch? Well, that's because you were probably part Native American, and at that point in time in history, that was not a cool thing to be. You either, you know, one or the other. That halfway in between thing wasn't a great spot to be at that time in history. So you made up a category that made you fit one category or the other. And you know, so there's a lot of that when you go into this. And when you write fiction, don't forget these same rules apply. People are still real in a detective novel. They still go to the bathroom, they still fall in love, they go have a coffee, they eat, you know.
They got to sleep.
You know, and that's the other one. Xena Warrior Princess did one of the funniest episodes ever. It was just called A Day in the Life. And it was like, what was an average day? Not an adventure, but an average day like for Xena Warrior Princess and her sidekick, Gabrielle. And that had to be the funniest episode they ever did. Because it was just the mundane world of these 2 women just walking from one village to the next. Just the mundanity of their world. It's hilarious. Absolutely crack you up. So, yeah, don't ever forget this stuff as you're writing. Because it's these little details, attention to detail that, you know, separates.
At some point, you have to have the basics of life covered. They gotta have a job, they gotta have money to make the world go around. They gotta be working for somebody, they gotta be the king or queen, but they've gotta have a purpose in life. They still have to eat, they still have to sleep, and if they don't eat and they don't sleep, there's an effect on them. Be them a monster or a human, there's still an effect of no sleep and no food. They gotta have water to drink or ale. I mean, you've gotta have something. You've gotta have, what do you do if there's a thunderstorm? Your days cannot always be sunny. Your nights cannot always be the perfect full moon, brilliantly lit night. you know?
Darn it.
It's okay to sit down and actually take your readers and have them stop and admire something that they normally take for granted. In Men in Black, at one point in the movie, he's going to leave and he's like, you know, the stars are really pretty. Because he had stopped watching them because his world was so involved in intergalactic stuff that when he was ready to retire was when he stopped to look at the stars again and admire them for their beauty. And that takes that personal touch and acknowledges the world from a different perspective. So think about those types of things, that what do they see? There was some book, I picked it up at one of the cons, I don't remember what it was. And it was very funny because the story was a short story and the central character was a blind person who was the king's messenger. And this was like in Old English times. So now how is this blind guy getting from place to place to deliver messages for the king? And all the comedy that results and all the things, the people he meets and all along the way. And it was very comical, and it's just taking that twist of a job and a challenge and doing, how do you build them together?